Hi, everyone, and welcome back to White Coat Chronicles with Tori. So, the current vibe, it is a Tuesday night. It's almost 8 o'clock. I just finished dinner. I have my laundry going, and I had therapy tonight. And feeling just mellow, but I really wanted to record this podcast tonight for many reasons. If you could tell by the title, we are going to be prepping for interviews. So since my last podcast episode went out on the reality of my gap year, I've kind of had a little block, like what should I record next? I have some things I want to talk about. I don't know if it's the right time to talk about it yet. I have some guests that I want to have on, but it didn't work out yet. But what happened since I last recorded is I magically got 3 more interviews. Now, I'll be so for real, I just was not expecting this because it's kind of late in the cycle, February, like the end of February. But it just goes to show it could come out, interviews, secondaries, acceptances, denials. I don't even know if that's the right word. I got denied from med school. I don't know. It could come out literally whenever. I've heard of stories of people getting accepted in June and starting in July, which is crazy. But this is just all part of the process that we're doing. And you have to be flexible and adaptable. And lots of these interviews kind of just told me a date and time. And then some of the interviews, I got to pick my time. But I have one coming up this Friday, and it's Tuesday. And we are really procrastinating. I can't believe I'm only starting to prep now. But I have prepped for an interview before that led to an acceptance. So I'm confident that I've kind of figured it out, but it's only been one. So still room to improve. But as I prep for this one coming up Friday, I want to kind of just bring you guys along and go through what I do, how I prep, what questions I prep. I found actually a great resource that I'm bringing on here. And you guys are just going to hear me prep. I'm kind of laughing. I don't know how this will turn out, but I want to just do the real thing here and not only help you guys if you're looking to prep for interviews, but also help myself prep for this interview Friday. So before we get into the goods, of course we have to do our high, low, pick a low. Okay, so high may be obvious, but just that I've gotten these interviews, I really went into this application cycle not thinking I was even going to get in because of my MCAT scores, and I've talked about this before in other episodes. And the fact that I got an acceptance and now more interviews, I'm just so excited. And 2 of the schools I'm not really sure that I would go to if I get in. I would still go to the school that I got accepted to over them. But one school is, I can't believe I got an interview to this school. And it's just kind of like a pat on the back for me. And I'm really, really happy. Low is that this is a low. So I have a silver lab. My family has a silver lab. His name's Asher. And yesterday he was poisoned. Now, the poison was self-inflicted by what was lying around in this house. And I'll just say straight up, he ate gummies. He ate weed gummies. And I won't say who they were, but they weren't mine. But he ate weed gummies. And he's a big dog, so his insides can handle a lot. But these were like 50 milligrams, and I think he ate 3 to 5 of them. Really, really bad. So we got a call at work from my family saying like, Asher's high, what do we do? And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Take him to a vet. They didn't because they just wanted to see if he would kind of fight it off. But my family was sending me these crazy photos of him, like a dog high, guys. A big dog high is not something you ever want to see. It was so sad. And I got home from work. I went over to see him. I'm like, Asher. Pulled open his eyelids. I didn't see his pupils. And I just freaked out. Called the poison control center. They wouldn't even tell me what to do. They just said, oh my God, bring him to a vet right away. So I knew that was bad. If they're not going to tell you anything, just send you right to a vet. I'm like, oh my God. So we look up the closest 24-hour vet. We bring him. He's all good. They give him fluids and a nausea pill and brought him back home. And he was okay, but like he would get up on all fours and just tilt. Like it was like the world was spinning. And this Asher is like eats anything, like jumps up on you. Well trained, but is just such a happy-go-lucky dog. And to see him like this, oh my God. I was actually crying. And like, if you know me, I'm not a huge animal person, but I love like my animals. I love Asher. And I was just surprised that I loved him that much that I started crying. But with all that being said, he's all good now. Don't leave edibles lying around in your house if you have a dog. Yeah. All right. And Piccolo, which is a random little thing that has occurred. I think my Piccolo this week is my success with blood draws. I got my phlebotomy certification a couple months ago. I think maybe October. My boss, the doctor, she paid for me to get the certification, so it would just make in-house blood draws much easier, and we didn't have to send patients elsewhere to get blood draws. And it was kind of a long training process, and when I started, I was so nervous. Like, it would just take me so long to do the blood draw. I'd, like, do everything perfectly, and, like, if anything would get near the incision, I would be like, oh my gosh, I need to clean and throw out everything all over again. But I've just gotten super confident with the blood draws, and knock on wood, I haven't missed any as of recently. I really shouldn't say this out loud. I swear to God, tomorrow at work, I'm going to miss it. But as of recently, I haven't. Alrighty, those are my high-low piccolos of the week. But now let's get into how I prep for med school interviews. All right, first thing that comes to my head is Reddit. Reddit. I love Reddit. I never did before, but since I applied to med school, I've become obsessed. I'm on the r/osteopathic chain. I don't know if that's what they call it, but I guess like that community. So I literally go on Reddit like Instagram. Like I'll just scroll through, see what people are saying, see who got in, what their scores were, this and that. And when I have an interview, I will look up the school and interview. Like, so for my accepted school, I would be like VCOM interviews, and a lot of stuff will come up, just how certain people prepped, what the vibe of the interview was, what they liked, what they didn't like. Some people give like a whole rundown of the interview. You can't really give a lot of the questions, but some people do, and I am thankful for those people. So that is my first place that I hit, and I try to get as much information about the interview as I can from there first. Now, as of recently for these upcoming interviews, I've also utilized the Student Doctor Network. I feel like if you're in the pre-med world, everyone tells you SDN, Student Doctor Network, go there. And I kind of just didn't for some reason. I thought you had to pay for it, and I'm just like, I have other resources I can use. I'm not going to use it, but I've started dabbling, and they really, really are great. You go into the Student Doctor Network, I click the medical tab, and then there's a couple different tabs under that, and I click interviews. And then you could look up your school and see what people have said. They give like pie charts of how people thought they did in comparison to their outcome, if they got accepted, denied, or waitlisted. And they also have questions there as well. So for the schools that I have coming up, really I've only done this for the one I have coming up Friday. I have a Google Doc, and I just copied and pasted all the questions I've found on Reddit and Student Doctor Network. Just compiled them all together and am going to go through them. Now, the most common questions that everyone should have prepared for, you don't have to look on Reddit or Student Doctor Network for these, but it's why you want to be a doctor, tell me about yourself, and for me, it was why doctor of osteopathic medicine. Now, I need to backtrack a little bit before I continue, because how I prep for these questions in particular is different than how I'm prepping for other questions because these are just so big, so important. And I honestly struggled prepping for these questions. I find the question, why you want to be a doctor, hard. I also find tell me about yourself hard because there's so much I want to say, yet I also want to keep it concise. And an important thing with these questions is that your answers to these questions can really steer the rest of your interview. Like, say you highlight you love skiing. I don't ski. I don't know why that came to mind. But say you highlight that you love skiing, you've been doing it, it's a part of you. You can connect with one of your interviewers and talk about skiing literally for your whole interview. I know people that have only talked about why they want to be a doctor in medical school for a little part of the interview and really just talked about their hobbies and their passions for the majority of the interview. So there definitely is a lot of pressure on these questions. And I vividly remember one night before my interview for VCOM, I couldn't sleep. It's like 1 a.m. and I just got up, went on YouTube and looked up why I want to be a doctor prep interview questions. I binged like so many different so many different videos about interviews. And I found a really good like couple videos about it. I will try to link it in the show notes when I find the guy. And it kind of brought you through the whole thinking process. So it told you to first sit down and write a couple things about yourself. And it was like elimination process because you would say, okay, what can I talk about? What can I give stories for? And I wasn't sitting down at my desk writing anything. I just was like staring at my ceiling, visually going through what I would write down on a piece of paper and what stuck out for me. And I was just talking to myself in bed for like hours. I went to bed. I don't even know what time I went to bed that night, but that night everything clicked for me and I'm like, yay, I know I want to be a doctor now. And now the next morning I went on a walk, I remember, and I was doing voice memo recordings. I would say, hi, Tori. Lovely to meet you. Thanks for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then I would say, sure, this is what I have to say about myself. And would just do fake interviews with myself and record it. Once I felt good about the points that I hit, if I got everything in that I wanted to say, I would save that particular recording and then play it over and over again. And the time that I used was driving. Whenever I have like a 25-minute drive to work and back. So I would just play my recordings, kind of alternate through listening to what I said and then practicing in my car. I don't know what my car thinks of me. I would talk to myself in my car all the time, pretending that I was going through an interview. So that was kind of what I did to prep for those really hard, heavy questions, in my opinion, at least, what they were for me. Why you want to be a doctor, tell me about yourself, and why DO. Now, there is way more to an interview. So for medical school, you could either have a traditional interview where it'll be you and interviewers. For me, I had a member of the faculty of VCOM and then a doctor at the local hospital. But there's also interviews called MMIs, and those are specific interviews where they give you certain ethical dilemmas. Some you have to write little essays for and do it all on the spot. So those are, in my opinion, way more hard to prep for. Some people do like them more, though, because you have a couple opportunities. Like, say you don't like one answer you gave to a question. You have a lot more coming because it's quick and you're rotating throughout a room. Thankfully, I haven't had one of those yet. And none of my upcoming ones are in that format, at least that I know of. I hope the Student Doctor Network is not lying to me. But I don't want to talk a lot about that type of style of interviews because I don't know. I just know what I've read. I don't know how they actually are because I haven't done any yet. So I'm now going to get into the actual prep for this interview because it needs to be done. And I'm procrastinating by talking about it and not doing it. So I have my Google Doc next to the recording app up. I have the questions that I found from the Student Doctor Network, and I have 45 questions that I have found from Reddit. Just someone posted it and basically was like, here is a ton of questions that really helped me. They're kind of random. I don't think all of them will ever be asked at once, but I really like these questions because it just gets your brain going, it gets the wheels turning, and I want to share this because I genuinely think these questions are great. Alrighty, first one. Why medical school and not any other medical profession? This is a pretty common question I've come across when I look up any of the schools. Lots of people will tell you to prep for this. So, how I go about this, why medical school and not any other medical profession? Why do you want to be a doctor and not a nurse? Why do you want to be a doctor and not a physician's assistant? There are so many medical professions right now, and you're obviously here because you want to be a doctor. Why? All right, so the first thing I would do is differentiate, my gosh, why I want to be on the clinical side of medicine. I love people. I'm such a people person, and I partially attribute that to my love of anthropology. I minored in that during undergrad, and my outlook on people, culture, just human beings as a whole has changed, and I can't see myself not working with people every day. I gain energy from people. I'm an extrovert, so my energy is highly reliant on the interactions I have with different types of people each day. So that kind of brings me to why I want to be on the clinical side of medicine. Now, why do I want to be a doctor and not a nurse, a physician's assistant, or any other healthcare profession? Is because I value leadership. My whole life, I have always strived to be a leader in whatever I'm doing. I don't know why. I'm not going to say this during the interview. I don't know why. It's just kind of how I've been predisposed to be. But with that being said, I am naturally drawn to wanting to be a doctor. I ultimately want to make decisions, and doctors do that at the end of the day with a lot of help, but they are the ones that make the decisions, and I can most see myself in that role. And now another part of this is that I consider myself a visual learner. I love watching videos to learn things. I love pictures, diagrams, and I think being a doctor just aligns so well with this. We spend years and years learning about the body, but to be able to see what we're learning in real life, in practice, and the medical field as a whole is a pretty visual field. I am honestly really looking forward to working with cadavers and seeing the anatomy of the human body. And that's kind of just a little topper. And you find ways to work different aspects in. This is kind of just a rough draft of how I'm preparing for this question. All right, next one. Was there one specific person or moment that has led you to becoming a doctor? I don't know. This is like real time honesty. I don't know. So give me a minute and let me prep for this. All right, I'm turning this question around and I'm going to say, no, there was not one specific moment or one person that kind of led to this click in my head that I want to be a doctor. I think I was exposed to the healthcare professions growing up because my mom is an LPN, a licensed practicing nurse. And I have memories waiting for her to come home so she could tell me her stories of how she helped different patients. And that was kind of my first exposure to it. And throughout my whole life, I've just kind of worked off of that interest and curiosity, explored that, was good at science and math, and kind of just went for it. So I don't think this is how I'm going to answer the question, but it's hard. It's so hard to say like one specific person or moment. My answer is no. It was a lot of things kind of building on each other that led me to want to become a doctor. Next question. What was the last book you read? Yes, guys, this is a question that I found from Student Doctor Network that for this interview I have coming up on Friday that was asked. So here is your sign to keep reading. Whether you're in your gap year, you're still in college, you are in multiple gap years, keep reading because you never know. So I have my most recent book right next to me. It's by Sally Rooney, Beautiful World, Where Are You? Now, not gonna lie, I am totally going to have to do a refresher on this book. But the biggest thing, and this might sound silly, but because the author is Irish, I want to kind of highlight that and work into it how my Irish culture is a big part of who I am. My mom came over from Ireland when she was 22 years old and has stayed here ever since, got her citizenship, but we go back all the time. I have a ton of family there, so I'm going to find a way to work that in. But this book is great, by the way. If anyone needs a book recommendation, it's an easy read and just gets your mind going. The preface is, or I guess summary, I shouldn't say preface. There's 2 girls, 2 guys. The 2 girls are best friends. One is a famous author, and the other is an editor at a magazine company. The one that's famous is super unhappy and ends up finding herself dating a drug addict. And the one that is an editor is in love with her childhood best friend. And the book kind of just plays into the dynamics between these 4 characters and really looks into how happiness is defined for different people, how happiness is defined by the context of what you're in, what you value. And I need to be prepared because I could so see them turning this around on me and being like, what do you think happiness is? So here's my little piece of advice: to be careful with how you answer the questions and know that what you say can be used as a follow-up question. So let me think real quick what happiness means to me. Okay, we're moving to the next question. Tell me about a time you failed. Now, we've all probably got thrown this question at some point. No matter what you're interviewing for, it's a pretty common question. And I believe, in my opinion, that it is because it allows the interviewers to witness the interviewee talking about something where maybe they're a little vulnerable, but also seeing how the interviewee dealt with failure. That's the biggest thing, in my opinion. Now, for me, I personally love this question because I have prepped an answer for this question a long, long time ago. And I will most definitely talk about my Fulbright application, how I applied for a Fulbright grant, worked extremely hard. It was a hell of an application process, but I won't go into it that much during the interview. But it took me to a point where I was a semifinalist, so I didn't think I was going to fail. I was very confident. And then I became an alternate finalist. I didn't get the grant at the end. And it was hard because it was the first time where I felt that hard work didn't pay off in the conventional way we're told it usually does. All the sweat and tears I put into this application did not result in me traveling to the UK with this scholarship. So this is definitely a failure that I would highlight because I want to be able to highlight my Fulbright application process. It was a big part of my medical school application, and it's especially important for any interviews that are closed where the interviewers don't know about you. They haven't seen your application. It's just kind of blank slate. So it would allow me to highlight this part. But even for open interviews, it's something that's important to me. So I want to find a way to highlight it. I guess I'm going to use the question, tell me about a time you failed to highlight it. But what you could take from this is, no matter what the question is, if you have something about yourself, about your application that makes you different, makes you stand out, that's a niche, maybe random thing, find a question where you can work it into and highlight it. And that's kind of what I plan on doing with this question. All right, next question and the one following it. What is one thing you're proudest about? And the next one is talk about an accomplishment you have and what you did to get there. And I'm kind of putting these two together because I think you can think of similar answers that will hit both of them. My vibe for these is that I want to have fun with these. I want to highlight my personality outside of my academic grinder personality. And what comes to mind is this podcast. I think I might talk about that, just how it was hard to kind of get over the social anxiety of posting a 30-something minute video or recording of you talking and having to listen to yourself over and over again. And that it was a proud moment for me when I first published this podcast. I would also maybe make it fun. Like, I'm proud of this recipe that I invented. I'm proud that I ran 3 miles without stopping. Those are kind of silly, but what I'm trying to say is not every answer has to be like super polished and perfect and in a line with your application and just highlighting all these big things you did. I think that's great, and part of your interview should be highlighting those aspects, but I want to have fun with these questions. I want to make sure I bring in my personality. All right, so those were the questions that I found on Student Doctor Network for the school I'm interviewing with this Friday. So thank you all for helping me prep this. It's now 26 minutes in. I have been sitting here for over an hour because I have just been in deep thought and also like quite literally practicing for this interview while I'm recording. But I want to get into the 45 questions that I found on Reddit. I will not go through all 45 because I don't think anyone wants to sit and listen to that, but just kind of highlight these fun ones that I found and some ones that I think are relevant. All right, classic why this school. In particular, if you are an out-of-state applicant applying to a certain college, so that is going to be my college, medical school. That's going to be the situation for me this Friday. This school is in Tennessee, and I'm from New York, so I need to think of a valid reason why I want to go to this school. Because one thing I've picked up on applying for medical school is that most schools favor people in state because they want you to practice in that state after your training. And if you're applying to a school that is not your home state, you have to have a pretty good reason as to why you're willing to leave your home state and work in another state after. TBH, I don't know what I'm going to say for this question. Can't really see myself in Tennessee, but you got to BS some of it, sorry. Another one. Explanations about bad grades, about any withdrawals. I have a big fat W on my application for Organic Chemistry 2. So, Tori, here's your reminder to prep why you dropped Organic Chemistry 2. Yay! Next question. Favorite class, most influential class. I got this question and I didn't prepare for this question. Now I know what to say, but think about genuinely what your favorite class was. And for me, I'm not going to talk about a medical class or like bio class. I'm going to talk about my Inside Out Prison Exchange class where I learned with inmates for a whole semester. The class was called Science, Technology, and Society. And there's a lot. There's a lot that I can bring from that experience. So I like that question. What do you do to relax? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do during your free time? They want to make sure that you're an actual human being that doesn't just sit and study all day, even though that's what medical students end up doing. But make sure you have some hobbies. I, quite honestly, am still working on mine, but I got to think of them. Most unique thing about you? Oh, God, I don't know. But I should think of that too. All right. How would you handle all the stress associated being a med student? Also got this question, like time management, stuff like that. I felt like my answer wasn't good for this because they kind of kept like probing after I gave it. They're like, but how? But how do you plan on doing this? So I want to talk about time blocking. I want to talk about the importance of mental health. But I also want to tread carefully because I don't want to come off as like, I need my sleep and like I need to work out 30 minutes a day at least, because that's just not realistic. But I do want it to come through that I care about the whole well-being of myself, so I'm able to be the best version of myself when it comes to practicing medicine. All right, here is a little group of interesting questions. Can you give an example of a time you went against your ethics? If you were responsible for a patient's death, how would you go about handling it? How will it affect you if you were to be sued by a patient? Dear God, I have not gotten any of these questions yet, but I think I should kind of prepare. I will say I have most definitely gone against my ethics and morals in this job that I'm currently in. Again, need to tread very lightly because my pre-med advisor always told me, never say, like, I've had a bad experience with a doctor and that's why I wanted to be a doctor. You have to be careful with how you talk about the people in the field that you want to go into. But there are some questions for thought. Okay, next one's, how would you feel working in a rural community? How do you feel about primary care? And what qualities do you think a DO should have? So these 3 questions are kind of more directed for being a doctor of osteopathic medicine. It's a big thing to practice in communities that are typically underserved in healthcare settings. It is a big thing for DOs to become primary care physicians. And I can see myself working in primary care, working in internal medicine. I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do, but I have an answer for why I like primary care. And I suggest you do too if you want to be a DO. How would you fix healthcare? This is a big one. I got asked this question by the doctor during my interview. And I'm very proud of my answer because I don't think a lot of people know about this, but it's insurance. It is insurance in healthcare. Insurance is ruining healthcare in the United States. And the only reason I know and am so passionate about this topic is because the doctor that I currently work for shares way too much with me about her problems with insurance and payments and all this stuff. And I could talk a lot about it. And I think the doctor appreciated me addressing this topic because most students that are applying to medical school haven't been exposed to all of these nitty-gritty, just really ugly parts of medicine that insurance has come into play with. So I'm going to talk about that. And it's a good question to prep for just overall. What would you do if you caught someone cheating? What would you do if your co-resident showed up with alcohol coming off their breath? I got a question similar to these. It's also kind of an ethical question. And it's funny because I brought this question up to the doctor that I work for. And she was like, wow, this is really hard because what if they were just having a couple cocktails the night before and you could still smell the alcohol on their breath? And I'm like, you know what? Fair. But I would always start this question with going to the culprit of the problem first. That shows that you are willing to confront problems and not avoid them. But again, it's kind of a hard question. I don't know if there is a right answer. I think the biggest thing that helped me prep for these ethical questions was prepping for the Casper exam, which I can best compare or explain as like a personality test. Some schools require it. I did it. So we got a lot of these questions like cheating, showing up under the influence, stuff like that. So if you want to prep with those questions, Casper Prep is great for those. How would you handle a non-compliant patient? This is a good one. I saw how a doctor handled this when I was shadowing a family medicine doctor near my undergrad university. And what I took from my experience, it could all be different, but ultimately the care is up to the patient. They have the final say unless there's lawyers and power of attorneys involved. But when it comes down to it, if a patient doesn't want to undergo treatment, you can't do it. Even if you know that the patient has a better chance of surviving in the end, it is ultimately the patient's decision. Just like pause though, because I'm not saying this is the right answer. This is what I would say. And that kind of brings me to the end of these 45 questions. I clumped a lot of them together and there are a lot more, but those are the ones I really wanted to hit on. I also highly suggest to you all and to my future self to prepare questions to ask your interviewers at the end. I know the school I have coming up on Friday, a lot of posts on Reddit said that they give you a pretty long amount of time to ask them questions. So most of the time you can't look up who your interviewers are going to be. I want to say all of the time, but I don't know. I have only interviewed at one school. But from what I've read, you're not really going to know who your interviewers are, but to have a couple of general questions, but that go a little deeper than basic questions like, how is student life? Or how are the professors here? Like you don't want to BS these questions. If they're giving you time to ask some questions, throw them some good ones. That was a lot. I'm not going to lie. I am like exhausted after filming after recording this episode because prepping for interviews is hard. You really have to dig deep inside of yourself. You have to ask yourself hard questions. You have to question who you are, what matters to you in life, and why you are giving the next 8 years of your life to medicine. And you have to be convincing. But the biggest thing that I've seen, and I definitely agree with, is be yourself. It's so cliche, I know. But I think I got my first acceptance because I tried my best to let my personality shine. It's really hard not to be nervous and to not let your nerves get the best of you. I can only suggest taking deep breaths, and many of them. But even with that being said, I was so nervous. But if you have that as your number one priority, please just let my personality come through. Let the good parts of me shine that are not all medically related. You want to show that you are a human being. And at the end of the day, most schools that you get interviews for, they want you. Your stats have exceeded their expectations. They want you at their school, and they are now just trying to see if you are normal and if you are a human being and if you are going to fit well in this environment. And I'm saying this as advice to myself as well because I am nervous. I'm super nervous for these interviews coming up. I know generally my answers, but it's hard working prep in whenever I'm exhausted at the end of the day. But we're doing it because this is what we do. I hope this helped anyone that is prepping or is going to have to prep for an interview in the future. I also want to acknowledge that these answers may not all be the right thing or quote unquote the right thing to say. But this is what I'm going to do. I will let you guys know how it ends up for me. And until then, wish me luck. I'll let you guys know how it goes, and I will see you in the next episode. Okay, bye.